On the day of my surgery, my fiancé's white moonlight was celebrating her birthday. He and my in-laws were busy celebrating with her, leaving me behind. When he finally remembered to call me after the surgery, he said, "It's just a minor illness, no need to be dramatic." By the time he came to see me, I was already handling the discharge procedures alone. Upon returning home, I calmly removed my engagement ring. I can't remember how many times they have disappointed me. I've chosen not to expect anything anymore. I packed my luggage and accepted the job offer from abroad that came a few days ago. They thought life would continue as usual, but they didn't know that this time, I was determined to leave. When Ethan pushed open the door, I had just taken off the ring and put it in the drawer. Just a month ago, we had gotten engaged. He stood with his hands in his pockets, seemingly forgetting that I had just undergone surgery, and said, "Tidy up and make dinner." Normally, I would have stood up immediately. But this time I ignored him and continued with my own tasks. Seeing that I didn't respond, Ethan raised his eyebrows and roughly pulled me up. "What's wrong with you? Didn't you hear what I said?" He hadn't noticed that I had removed the engagement ring. He frowned and ordered, "Lillian just returned from abroad a few days ago. Since the maid is on leave tonight, make some of your specialty dishes for her to try. My parents treat her like their own daughter, so you should be nice to her too." I glanced at him indifferently, still expressionless. Ethan was somewhat surprised that I would show such an attitude. Previously, when they asked me to cook, I would eagerly ask what they wanted to eat. But this time I seemed completely indifferent. Ethan was stunned for a moment, then sneered as if he understood, "Are you afraid that Lillian will take me away? I treat her like a sister, so you'd better not target her." We stood face to face, and he stared at me, seemingly wanting me to suppress my bad mood. It wasn't until he noticed my slightly red eyes that he slightly restrained his reproachful gaze. After a while, he said, "Lillian has been abroad for 7 years. It's not easy for her to come back. Can't you be more accommodating? I know you care about the surgery that day, but it was just a vocal cord surgery. What's the big deal? You're still alive, aren't you?" I remained silent and went to the kitchen to start washing and preparing the vegetables. In Ethan's eyes, my surgery was less important than Lillian's birthday. He didn't know how much fear and hopeful expectation I had for this surgery. My vocal cords were severely damaged due to physiological and psychological factors, and there were even growths. But I knew Ethan used to love hearing me sing, so I decided to take the risk and have the surgery. Even though the doctor told me it was unlikely to restore my voice to its former state. I naively thought he would be there with me, helping me through it all, and then listen to me sing for him again. However, the result was complete disappointment. Before the surgery, my partner was absent, and none of my family was there. What was I to them? Lying alone on the cold operating table, falling asleep as the anesthesia took effect, with no comfort outside. My parents had passed away in an accident a few years ago, and I had already lost my safe haven. After waking up, I specifically checked Lillian's Instagram and sure enough, she had posted. The background was a dazzling banquet hall, with beautiful flowers and a pile of gifts in her hands. The caption read, "So happy to celebrate my birthday with Ethan, brother and uncle and aunt." After the surgery, the doctor asked if I needed help contacting my family. I stared at the photo, smiled bitterly, and shook my head. Under the hospital room lights, my face looked particularly pale. No one knew that I had called Ethan right after waking up. I asked him why he didn't come. He said, "It's just a minor illness, why are you being so dramatic?" And now, Ethan wanted me, who had just been discharged from the hospital, to cook especially for Lillian. I laughed self-mockingly, recalling the email I received a few days ago. It was an offer from a foreign company. Before this, I had already made a name for myself in the domestic design industry. However, the Ching family only wanted me to return to the family and become a full-time housewife after marriage. The boss there gave me half a month to consider, and I was glad I didn't refuse outright. Now, I was sure this would be my chance to leave. Ethan stood in the kitchen, seemingly wanting to remind me of something. "Please don't block the fridge, thank you." I pushed him aside directly. Ethan's face stiffened, and at that moment, Lillian's excited voice came from the living room. "Ethan brother, come quickly, I brought you a gift. I was busy with my birthday right after returning and didn't have time to give it to you." Ethan looked pleased and walked out eagerly. Charles and Grace said happily, "Lillian is always so polite. Why bring gifts among family?" I continued chopping vegetables, listening to their harmonious conversation without any emotion. After all, I was just the cook, and they were more like a family. After preparing 5 dishes and a soup, I slowly set 4 sets of bowls and chopsticks on the dining table. They chatted while eating, and I turned back to the kitchen to clean up. Lillian talked endlessly about her experiences abroad and how much she missed them. Charles and Grace were delighted, and Grace kept serving her food, saying with concern, "I heard that Western food isn't filling. Look how much weight you've lost. Eat more." Ethan even took out freshly bought lychees, peeled them one by one, and placed them on a fruit plate for her. Through the sliding door, I watched them laughing and talking at the table. I knew clearly that I was the most redundant and out-of-place presence. This warmth was something I had never felt from them. "Sister Elena, why aren't you coming to eat? Are you still angry about that day?" Lillian's tone was slightly aggrieved, and she continued, "I know it's all my fault. I should have celebrated my birthday alone." As soon as she said this, Ethan and the others turned their gaze to the kitchen. Grace's eyes flashed with sharpness, and she said impatiently, "Elena, haven't you thrown enough tantrums?" Charles also chimed in, "We know it was your surgery day, but it's not like you had a terminal illness or were in critical condition. What use would we be there?" Seeing Lillian gently pat Grace's shoulder, her cherry-like lips curved. "It's normal for Sister Elena to be emotional. Please don't blame her anymore." She then turned to look at me, and I clearly saw the pride hidden in her eyes. When our eyes met, she didn't bother to hide it. I remembered the time I went to the hospital for a checkup. Ethan had promised to accompany me, but he left me with a taxi driver midway to pick up Lillian from the airport. A few days earlier, I had heard her talking to Ethan on the phone. Lillian said she was checking flight dates, and Ethan specifically told her that he had to accompany me for a checkup that day. Yet, she chose to fly back that day, calling it a surprise. But this surprise was a gift that brought me pain alone. Actually, I had known for a long time that I wouldn't be their choice. Even Ethan, who vowed to spend his life with me, wouldn't firmly stand by my side. I should have been sad, even hysterical. However, I was calm to the point of disbelief. "I'm fine, and I'm not angry." I wiped my hands on the apron and replied indifferently. Their eyes showed a hint of surprise, as if they thought I should be angry. But if I were angry, they would blame me. It was contradictory and ridiculous. They probably knew how excessive their actions were this time, yet they still did it. They didn't consider my position at all, and now they were puzzled by my unusual calmness. The atmosphere at home fell into silence. After a moment, Charles said, "Elena, it's best that you're not angry. After all, we are a family." I nodded, took off the apron, and sat quietly at the edge of the table. Seeing that I was willing to sit down and eat, they felt it was no big deal and continued to care for Lillian. I had no appetite, ate a few bites of rice, and put down my chopsticks. Grace smiled at Lillian, wishing she could put all the delicious food in her bowl. Lillian talked about her achievements during her studies and internships abroad, as well as her plans after returning. She said she didn't want to rely on her family and had already received an offer from a top 10 company in the country. She wanted to create her own world with her own strength. Everyone praised her endlessly, except for me. Seeing that I remained silent, Grace coughed lightly in embarrassment. "Elena, why are you only eating rice?" Saying that, she served me a piece of braised pork. "Lillian just came back, so it's normal for us to take extra care of her." I stared at the meat in my bowl, feeling nauseous from the greasiness, especially since I was still in recovery. "It's okay, I'm full." Grace's face changed, thinking I was giving her attitude again, and said angrily, "What do you want?" Ethan was about to speak when Lillian suddenly widened her eyes, covered her stomach with her hand, and even dropped her chopsticks to the ground. I feel so uncomfortable. I can't breathe. Lillian leaned on Ethan, breathing rapidly, with layers of sweat on her fair skin. Patches of red rash appeared in Ethan's sight. Ethan asked in a panic, "Lillian, what are you allergic to?" Grace's gaze fell on me, and without a word, she pulled me up and slapped me hard. Instantly, my cheek felt burning pain. "Elena, you made the food. Did you do it on purpose? What did you put in to harm Lillian?" Ethan picked up Lillian and angrily said to me, "Elena, how can you be so vicious? If you have any dissatisfaction, can't you direct it at me?" Grace was so angry that she poured half a bowl of soup on me. Charles glared at me fiercely and said, "Going to the hospital is more important." After a flurry of curses, they hurriedly took Lillian to the hospital. Can they be a little reasonable? How would I know what Lillian is allergic to? I wanted to say that I didn't do it and had no reason to, but they wouldn't believe me. They preferred to believe Lillian's poor acting. After a long time, I returned to my room. Sitting at the desk, the soup stains on my clothes hadn't dried yet. I took out a thick photo album from the drawer. Memories flooded back like a tide. The front part contained photos of me and my parents from middle school. I was once a person who was deeply cared for, growing up surrounded by my parents' love. Although my family wasn't as wealthy as the Cheen family, it was still well off, and I was never mistreated. The latter part of the album held bits and pieces of me and Ethan. In college, Ethan and I fell in love. I stood out in the campus top 10 singers, and Ethan watched me intently from below. That day, Ethan arranged flowers in the shape of a heart under the dorm building and loudly said, "Please be with me." I felt shy and embarrassed, but the man in front of me was shining brightly. Others cheered, and we embraced amidst the flowing lights. We became the envy of everyone. Lillian's existence was never a secret between us. Ethan told me they were childhood sweethearts, growing up together, and he had long considered her his sister. Ethan said that even though they were very close, the person he cared about most was always me. And I believed him without reservation. Right after graduating from college, my parents passed away in an accident. Ethan promised them at their bedside to take care of me. He said firmly, "Rest assured, I'll be responsible for Elena for the rest of her life." Soon after, at Ethan's strong request, I moved into their home. I thought I had found support and could achieve the happiness my parents hoped for. But I gradually realized that the passion and sincerity were fading away. After starting work, Ethan met all kinds of people and began to find me increasingly ordinary. Charles and Grace were never quite satisfied with me. Their occasional care and smiles were only for their son's sake. In their eyes, I was living under their roof, essentially an orphan with both parents deceased. What they really wanted was a daughter-in-law like Lillian. Under immense pressure, my vocal cords were severely damaged, and I gradually lost my original voice. I think Lillian's arrival was just the final straw that broke the camel's back. It made me completely disappointed and determined to give up. And my desire to restore my vocal cords was just an excuse for Ethan's indifference. Tears slid down my cheeks and fell onto the photos. "Mom and Dad, you must be worried about me. It's my fault for not being strong enough. But please don't worry. I'll be leaving here soon." I replied to that email, indicating that I accepted the offer and could start immediately. I took all my clothes out of the closet. After neatly folding them into the suitcase, I put the photo album inside. Of course, I removed the parts with Ethan. The response from the foreign company was quick, and they immediately had a senior manager contact me online. But after a few words, Ethan's call came in. As expected, he was calling to accuse me. "Elena, you must be very happy now. You've achieved your goal." I retorted angrily, "What goal? The goal of canceling our engagement?" Ethan seemed not to have heard the latter part and just sneered, "The goal of harming Lillian. I finally see what kind of person you are." I listened quietly to his accusations and then said calmly, "Yes, it's all my fault. When she recovers, I'll beg for her forgiveness, okay? If there's nothing else, I'll hang up. I'm busy. Goodbye." Before Ethan could react, I hung up the phone. He must not have expected this reaction from me. Many times before, he would scroll through Lillian's glamorous life on Instagram. I asked him why he liked looking at it so much and if he missed her. He said, "She's just my sister." In Ethan's eyes, all this was perfectly normal, and my slight jealousy was seen as making a fuss over nothing. Charles and Grace, of course, sided with their son, calling me a petty and resentful woman. I used to think wishfully that as long as Lillian didn't come back, it would be fine. I hoped she would stay abroad and even immigrate. Now, I find this thought laughable and even hateful. After a while, my phone received a message notification. It was from Ethan, probably what he wanted to say before I hung up. "Let's minimize the issue. After she recovers, you should sincerely apologize to Lillian. If you dare to cause any more trouble, I think our marriage won't happen." The words were full of warnings, but I felt indifferent and relieved. Anyway, even if he wanted to get married, I didn't want to anymore. I think Ethan must be by Lillian's bedside now, serving her tea and water, never leaving her side. Lillian being hospitalized gave him the best reason to take care of her. And my surgery, in his eyes, was just a trivial matter. I wouldn't die from it. Childhood sweethearts, white moonlight. Sister, the buffs are stacked. Thinking of this, I laughed self-mockingly, turned off my phone without replying, and continued to communicate with the new company on the computer. By almost midnight, I had finally finished packing my luggage and was ready to go back to the house where I used to live with my parents. As I was about to go down the stairs, there was movement at the door, and I guessed they were back. The ones who came back were Charles and Grace. Ethan wasn't there. They sat on the sofa with tired expressions, unaware that I was standing on the stairs with my suitcase. Grace suddenly said with emotion, "It seems Ethan really likes Lillian. He said he would take care of her all night. Lillian was abroad for the past few years, and they couldn't meet, so he ended up with Elena." Charles agreed. They grew up together, and our family and the Lynn family are old friends. Since Ethan was sensible, I've been optimistic about this match. But Elena and Ethan's engagement is known to everyone. If we suddenly call it off, wouldn't it be embarrassing? Grace said to herself, "Anyway, to put it bluntly, Ethan and Elena haven't registered their marriage yet, so there's still room for maneuver. But Elena does have her merits. She's quite efficient at cooking and doing housework." As Grace was speaking, she looked up and saw me, her pupils dilating instantly. Charles awkwardly tried to smooth things over. "Elena, why are you here? Why aren't you sleeping?" They looked at each other, somewhat embarrassed, probably thinking I was already asleep. I slowly lifted my suitcase and walked down step by step. "My friend needs me for something." Grace said, "Oh," as if relieved. Then Charles noticed the suitcase in my hand and asked suspiciously, "Going to see a friend with a suitcase?" Grace, seeing this, became self-righteous again. "Are you trying to run away?" "Don't worry, Lillian isn't that petty." Charles gave me a contemptuous look. "She's not like you." They started bringing up the evening's incident again. "You caused Lillian to be hospitalized, do you know that? She just came back not long ago. If you have any opinions, just say them directly. There's no need to do such harmful things." It seemed they were determined not to let it go. The fire in my heart ignited, and I sneered, dialing Ethan's number. I put it on speaker, and Lillian's voice came from the other end. Perfect, I was planning to have Ethan pass the phone to her anyway. Lillian said in a sweet voice, "Is this Sister Elena? Ethan brother went to get me some hot water. You're not still angry, are you? Don't be so petty." Her words were so full of pretense that they gave me goosebumps, and even Charles and Grace nearby were shocked. But I just wanted to resolve this mess quickly. I smiled and said, "I sincerely hope that Ethan can take good care of you." As soon as I said this, Charles, Grace, and Lillian all fell silent. They probably never expected me to say such a thing so calmly. After a while, Lillian said, "Sister Elena, you're not joking, are you?" I said directly, "I'm serious. I don't know what you're allergic to, and I didn't buy the ingredients, but I still want to say sorry to you." Without waiting for her response, I hung up the phone. Turning to look at Charles and Grace, they both had incredulous expressions at my actions. "May I leave now?" They didn't say anything or stop me, so I walked out the door with my suitcase. Back at my old home, my whole body felt lighter. I set my phone to airplane mode, cutting off all contact with the outside world, and immersed myself in studying my new designs. After getting my visa, I was ready to go. It wasn't until 2 days before departure that I fully connected my phone. Various messages popped up like cannonballs. There were messages from Ethan, my best friend, friends, and Charles and Grace. I first opened the message thread with my best friend. She was very angry and felt indignant for me. Besides voice messages, there were nearly 100 text messages, most of which were cursing the Chin family and Lillian. The only photo my best friend sent was a screenshot of Lillian's Facebook. It showed a high-end restaurant and a group photo with the Chin family, looking like a family portrait. I took a special look at Ethan. He was standing side by side with Lillian, looking like a perfect couple. Even their clothes seemed to match. Lillian's caption was, "A belated welcome back party." Ethan's brother was busy celebrating my birthday a few days ago. I didn't quite understand how my best friend got this Facebook post from Lillian, since I didn't even have her Facebook. But it was clear she was furious. She even commented below, "Envious. Taking a family photo with a married man must feel great." I couldn't help but laugh and cry, and it took a lot of effort to calm her down before checking other messages. Some people blamed me for letting my friend say such things under Lillian's Facebook post. But honestly, I found it quite satisfying. Out of politeness and decency, I still explained and apologized. Not long after, Charles called me. "Elena, why did you disappear without a reason? Do you know we've been looking for you these days?" As soon as he finished speaking, I heard Lillian's laughter with Ethan in the background. "Ethan brother, I know a great Sichuan restaurant. Let's go there today, okay? We'll eat whatever you like." After so many days, these people were still dining together. I indifferently repeated Charles's words, "Looking for me?" Charles was choked by my response and said awkwardly, "Life has to go on as usual. Without you, do we have to mourn? A few days ago, your friend spoke recklessly." "What did she say to Lillian?" "She almost cried." I said lightly, "Oh, I apologize on her behalf." "Sorry." Seeing my attitude, Charles felt like punching cotton and didn't know what to say for a moment. After a while, he said, "Remember to come back. We'll be the same as before." I knew why he said that. A few days ago, he had mentioned that everyone knew about my engagement with Ethan. The Chin family was just afraid of losing face. Before I could respond, Ethan grabbed the phone. His voice was filled with angry questioning, showing no concern for my disappearance over the days. "Elena, did you ask your best friend to cause trouble under Lillian's Facebook post? How can you be so unreasonable? Has Lillian ever hurt you? And you treat her like this? I know you're jealous, but I've told you many times, Lillian is like my sister, our family. Look at how my parents treat her, you should know that. Sometimes you should reflect on your own issues." His words were arrogant and unreasonable, like splashing dirty water on me. My hand trembled slightly. I knew he was no longer the Ethan I knew. Before, he had vowed to always stand by my side. Even if his parents weren't satisfied with me, he would find ways to make them accept me. He said because he loved me, love is partial, love is to make me happy. But now, he thought all the problems were my fault. I shouldn't expect him to wait outside the operating room. I shouldn't show any emotions, even if he and Lillian were extremely ambiguous. But I no longer felt heartbroken. Perhaps Ethan never loved me. Like his parents said, he and Lillian had been apart for so many years, and I was just an unexpected intruder. He was blinded by his transferred passionate feelings until Lillian returned. When the bright moonlight shone on him again, he completely forgot about my existence. This was just my speculation, and if it were true, I didn't care anymore. Seeing through someone is the best thing. I didn't say anything more, but suddenly, Ethan apologized hurriedly from the other end. So he did know that some of his words were too much. But in my eyes, those apologies were just simple words, meaning nothing. I was unmoved. The phone rang with a notification of successful flight booking, and I remained calm. Ethan, let's not get married. It's over between us. I've decided to leave. Hearing my words, there was a long silence on the other end. I didn't bother waiting for his response and was about to hang up when Ethan said dismissively, Elena, are you threatening me? You love me so much, would you really leave me? You're not still holding a grudge over the surgery, are you? Are you really that petty? I chuckled, yes, I am that petty. Ethan laughed, don't joke around. If you have surgery again, I'll stand by your side, okay? He seemed to be joking, but I was determined to leave. Charles and Grace seemed to be saying something to him, and I didn't want to communicate with them anymore, so I hung up directly. Then, I unhesitatingly blocked all their contact methods. I felt unprecedentedly relaxed, and that night, I slept soundly. I had a dream where a young girl dragged her suitcase into a luxurious villa. She carefully went to her room, and I heard her murmuring, Uncle and Aunt don't like me. I have to work hard to do well and not disappoint Ethan. As she spoke, she showed a hopeful smile. The scene changed, and the girl seemed more mature. She was covering her throat, trying various medicines. My throat can't exert force anymore. Fortunately, Ethan said he would accompany me to the hospital for a checkup this afternoon. I really hope I can continue singing for him. I hope he can love me a little more. Am I too greedy? The girl spoke intermittently, with only a bitter smile on her face. The final scene was set in a hospital room, where she lay on the white sheets, staring at the ceiling. She suddenly said, I left too late. I firmly told her, anyway, now you can leave any time. Walk away without looking back, boldly move forward. The next day, I boarded the plane to a distant place, leaving all memories behind. All the unwillingness, grievances, disappointments, and pain dissipated completely as the plane flew high. I worked hard, constantly learning and studying new knowledge to enrich myself. My leaders praised my work repeatedly, and I even achieved excellent results in the annual design competition. The busyness at work eroded the loneliness of being alone abroad. Occasionally, I would think of Lillian boasting about her experiences abroad at the dinner table and the glamorous photos in my mind. I looked down at the drafts in my hand and the new work on the computer, feeling very certain. I was completely different from her. After a period of intense work, the company gave me a month's vacation. I decided to go back and stay at my old home for a while. That day, I was chatting with my best friend on Facebook. She told me about the Chin family's recent situation, gloating. I almost died laughing, Elena, you know, after you went abroad, they were all anxious. Anxious? I explained to my best friend that they were afraid others would think they drove away the Chin family's daughter-in-law, which would damage their reputation. My best friend said happily, anyway, they've been inquiring about your whereabouts everywhere. No wonder my phone kept intercepting many unknown numbers recently. Thanks to my setting not to answer unknown calls. I think they were the ones calling. At that moment, a call came in, showing the name, Sam. I remembered this was Ethan's good buddy's phone, which I had saved in my contacts and forgot to delete. After thinking, I decided to answer. As if I had a premonition, it was Ethan on the other end. As soon as I answered, his excited and anxious voice came through. Elena, you finally answered the phone. I borrowed a friend's phone to call you. Where on earth have you been? We couldn't contact you. How could you be so angry? I wanted to say that I wasn't angry, I just figured it out. I only heard Ethan say somewhat uncomfortably, come back. We'll live well from now on. I'm still waiting for you to sing for me. I think Ethan must have seen that all my personal belongings were gone. The engagement ring was left behind, along with the photos of us together. Even if Ethan was foolish, he could see that I was serious this time. Now he wanted to salvage the situation, looking full of guilt, but I had lost my 100% trust in him. Maybe he just suddenly remembered some of my good points, or perhaps he just wanted to ease his conscience. After thorough disappointment and heartache, I had already freed myself. I said indifferently, "No need. I don't want to be with you anymore." After a long time, I only heard Ethan's sigh, and then he repeated his plea for me to come back. At that moment, I was lying in the house where I had lived for nearly 20 years. Although it wasn't as luxurious as the Cheen family's villa, it was my warm home. It held the traces of my life with my parents, precious memories. I said firmly, "I have my own home, that's enough. Who cares about what you gave me?" With that, I hung up the phone. I thought that would be the end of it. Unexpectedly, the next day when I went downstairs, I saw Ethan with his parents waiting for me at the door. I hadn't seen them for several months, but when I saw them again, my heart was calm. When they saw me, their faces showed unconcealed joy. Grace quickly stepped forward and grabbed me, saying excitedly, "We finally found you. Do you know that Ethan hasn't been eating or sleeping well for months because of you?" Ethan stood in front of me, looking much thinner and very haggard. He stared at me for a long time before slowly saying, "Elena, I miss you very much." If it were the old me, I would have hugged him immediately, feeling immense heartache. But now, I just felt an inexplicable irritation. "Mr. Ethan, if I remember correctly, we have no relationship anymore." Hearing this, Ethan's eyes widened, and his tall body trembled slightly. "What do you mean no relationship?" "That's just what you said unilaterally." Did I agree? I narrowed my eyes and said calmly, "Yes, I unilaterally broke up with you. I don't need your agreement." Charles and Grace's faces stiffened, and I turned my gaze to them. "Uncle and Aunt, I heard what you said that day." They immediately looked guilty, and I decided to make everything clear at once. "In your eyes, how could someone from a small family like mine be worthy of you? If it weren't for making your precious son happy, I probably wouldn't even be allowed to step into your house." "Wait," Aunt said, "I'm quite efficient at doing chores." The three of them looked increasingly ugly, and I continued, "Fortunately, Lillian came back, and we can cut our losses. This is good for everyone. You can finally choose the daughter-in-law you truly like." Charles and Grace bowed their heads, unable to argue, while Ethan stepped forward and grabbed my shoulders. I admit, I might have liked Lillian in the past, but that was before. You have to believe that the one I love now is you. If I didn't love you, why would I come to find you? Why would I insist on marrying you? I looked into his eyes, and Ethan seemed to have a glimmer of hope. I smiled lightly and continued mercilessly, "But I can no longer feel your love. You killed our love with your own hands." Ethan's hand dropped weakly, as if making a last attempt to retain me. "Elena, I've already ordered your wedding dress. I hired the most famous designer, you'll definitely like it. Let's get married this month, okay? I won't treat you badly again. I'll definitely make you happy." His tone was pleading, almost lost. "I'm sorry, I was just used to the way I interacted with Lillian. I really didn't know you would be hurt so much. You really have the heart to leave me." With just used to and didn't know, he wanted to erase all his previous actions. I stepped back, wanting to keep my distance from him. The man's eyes were red. It was the first time I saw him like this, and my heart was still somewhat shaken. But so what? I had endured countless days of pain, now it was his turn to suffer for a while. I had expected, hoped, and even been lucky. But in the end, all I got was Ethan's repeated disappointments and despair. I won't look back anymore. From now on, I will sing for myself. Ethan, we can't go back to how things were. When I lacked love, you couldn't give me love. When I was scared and helpless, you couldn't give me companionship. I think, before, you just relied on the fact that I loved you more, because you were sure I wouldn't leave." My words hit Ethan's sore spot, the most truthful revelation. He squatted down tremblingly, covered his face with his hands, and seemed to be crying. After a long time, he said slowly with red eyes, "I apologize to you. Won't you really forgive me?" I think Ethan still hadn't figured out why I suddenly became like this. In his eyes, it seemed like it was just a few days after Lillian returned, but he didn't know that I had been suffering for years. I chuckled. Does apologizing mean I have to forgive? Is there such a law? I felt I had made myself clear enough. My patience was wearing thin, and I didn't want to argue anymore, so I prepared to turn and leave. But Grace stopped me again. Grace sighed deeply and said, "Elena, I know you've suffered a lot in our family. We had a bad attitude towards you before. Actually, Lillian's allergy was because I gave her a cup of honey water before dinner. It has nothing to do with you. We wronged you. I've thought about it carefully. On the day of your surgery, Ethan really shouldn't have been outside celebrating Lillian's birthday. But these words came too late for me. I no longer cared. After accumulating disappointment, I no longer expected them to treat me as family. My heart was calm as water, and I only said, "I've heard what you said. Can I leave now?" Charles said heavily, "Without you, what will Ethan do? Moreover, you're engaged. What will people say if it gets out? Elena, can you consider the bigger picture? Many relatives and friends have been asking us these days. What we said to Ethan's mother that day was just a moment of impulse. Consider the bigger picture?" Hearing this, I felt both angry and amused. Wasn't it a big deal when Ethan and Lillian were so ambiguous that it got out? I didn't plan to save face for them anymore. Let's lay it all out, no need to be polite. You were right. Ethan and I haven't registered our marriage, so you can say I reneged. Back then, you criticized me for this and that. I tried hard to please you, but what did I get in the end? You love your son and are afraid he'll be sad. You love your face and are afraid of disgracing the Chin family. I've made myself clear enough. The three of them turned pale, as if I had torn off the mask of this farce. Charles stammered, "Your parents are gone. How will you live alone?" "I can live better on my own." After that, I didn't stay any longer, not wanting to look at them standing there. After that, I didn't see the Chin family again in my country. In the following days in the country, I didn't see the Chin family again. I think, with things said to this extent, they knew I probably wouldn't go back. I just occasionally received some high-end gifts at the door, probably sent by Ethan through someone. But I didn't accept them and had my best friend distribute them to other good sisters. After the 1-month vacation, I returned to the company and started working on new projects. Coincidentally, I heard about Lillian from my colleagues. She was a notorious figure in the study abroad circle, with a messy private life and relationships with various people. As long as men flattered her, she never refused. Because she was too wild, her academic performance had been terrible since high school, and she didn't even get a college diploma. Relying on her family's wealth, she specifically bullied students who worked part-time to support themselves. The things she boasted about in front of the Chin family were all lies. She was just a devil in a beautiful shell. That day, I heard from my best friend about Ethan's recent situation. She said Ethan had been depressed for a long time, lost a big business deal, and was even cheated out of tens of millions by company people. The Chin family's company plummeted as a result, and Charles cursed him as a useless and unfilial son. Lillian also despised him and one day complained about the Chin family's mess outside, which was overheard by Grace's socialite friend. When Grace found out, she confronted Lillian, and Lillian directly revealed her true colors and argued with her. "Don't think your Chin family is anything special. I've seen more of the world than you. Ethan means nothing to me." After that, Lillian cut ties with them and continued her chaotic life in the country. Later, Ethan drank every day to drown his sorrows, got into a fight at a bar, and was hospitalized for 2 months, almost becoming lame. Like reading news on my phone, hearing these messages, I could only sigh. After all, I once knew them. Many years later, I returned to start my own design company. At the annual meeting, I would occasionally sing a song, receiving small praises from employees. When Ethan heard about me, he wanted to come find me, but I had security keep him out. Our story was over. Even if Ethan regretted it, that was just a part of his life. His thoughts had nothing to do with me anymore. From now on, I will only move forward in my own life.